its strength, its heart, its mind, to join me in this precious hour, to bless, to break, to bind, and sever all the chains, the doubt, and veils that leave me blind, as we walk along through crooked path and leave this world behind.
Take number 2. Was that match? Hello everyone, it's good to be back. I'm so happy. Oh, let's dim it down a bit. Yes. Hello, how are you? I'm sorry, this is take 2 because the first video that I did is gone. I accidentally got rid of it. I don't know what to say other than I'm sorry. But hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Myths and Magic with your host Leanne Ocken. I am so happy to be here. I am of course remiss because yes, I accidentally lost what I had before. But honestly, it's been quite some time since we've gotten together, and honestly, a lot has happened, and a lot really hasn't. You know, the school, it's the same. The job is the same. So I'm trying to sort of, grow or whatever. It's been a very long time, and I apologize for it. And this is a little bit, a tad bit distracting. Over there. What if it just lights the other one? That'd be so awesome. But I don't know if you can pan over, see the setup, just a little something. I mean, honestly, do I even need it? I don't know. It's all about me. But honestly though, I do apologize. I haven't really been on my game as much as I'd like to be. So, but no, I've done a lot of researching, a lot of looking inward. All of us need to do this sort of thing when we are practicing, when we are doing, this shit all the time. And no, I'm not like this dressed all the time either. I picked it for this because, some anonymity is nice. And currently I have people in my house that don't really, all sort of vibes what I'm doing. But, like I said, I'm in hiding. So I'm trying to make sure everything is tip-top notch. But I think, though, also I should mention that perhaps my approach to these sort of things, I'm trying to do these things in a way that is informational, comical, whatever. But honestly, I want it to be as real as possible. So there's a lot of that. Now, I rarely ever have to do second takes. This is a bit new to me. I don't even know how to start. I mean, it feels weird. It feels strange. I don't know. I had so many genuine moments the first time I did this, and I was like, this is going to be perfect. And no, it is fucking gone. So I don't even know where to start. But honestly, I'm happy. And as you all know, our special co-host has returned from the dead. From his vacation, his makeover. And yes, he is a he. In fact, don't get at me. He's my spawn, my confidant. And he likes me putting things inside him. So there's a positive. I'm like, whatever. I'm not going to continue into it. But, I'm so happy you all are here. I'm going to talk about something that I think has to be addressed and that has to be talked about. There's a few things here. Yes, it is encrypted, but I will read some things that I think I left open for interpretation. So let's just see here. There's not only to say that the concept of this particular fate, that's something. That's a tirade. I'm not going to get into. I already did. Let me see here. The call to spirit invocation. The call to power, right of banishment, right of binding. Okay. Right of departing, right of welcome. The mantra for grounding, building energy and focus. No, that's incantations and rites. What am I looking for? Those are plants. Let me see here. Okay, hold on. It's vital for the craft. Special case for spells. Spells are named for the result they give, or more correctly put, the identifier of the results of the working. There are thousands of spells one can learn, but you must identify which one works for you and how you are easily able to perform these spells. This is but one indicator of where your soul aligns within the sphere of magic and mana. So I think we can start there. The subject for today is going to be called spiritual alignment, and this is going to be in regards to magic and mana. I may or may not have referred to this before, but I believe in a video long ago. I hope I'm not rehashing this, but I think I'm going to be a bit deeper. I mentioned how, according to our belief system, or I guess this UPG, unverified personal gnosis, it is sort of a wheel, okay, and there's different elements and all that shit. You have fire, you have your air, earth, water. You have your light, your dark, your shadow, your whatever, what's call it. All of these things sort of surround or encompass the world, okay? And so there are certain groups of people, like practitioners of people that, show signs of, magical, acuity or whatever you want to call it, attunement. They're sort of aligned to this sort of thing. And I want to sort of expand upon that. So when we talk about spiritual alignment, what I'm talking about is how the spirits of the person themselves or their soul seems to have a sort of inclination, or I believe a sort of connection to something, to a craft of a certain type. Like, for example, a lot of us aren't really sure where to start our practice. And this could be perhaps a video you can watch to help you sort of get to that point. So when it comes to spiritual alignment, I'm talking more so about, for example, if you are, like, let's say, more artistically inclined with things like visual arts, visual aids for that matter. You are very good at drawing, sketching, painting, whatever you want to fucking call it. And so what happens is that these sort of things just captivate you. And so this is perhaps a skill or belief, a gift you have received from being within a certain alignment to that sort of skill. I'm not going to say which one it is because it could be in any sort of spectrum within sort of magical circle of the elements or whatever you want to call it. And so when it comes to, what your practice should be, if you find that you are, more excited about drawing or painting, or you have that sort of talent, that gift or whatever it is, you need to focus on that part when it comes to your magic, because it's going to be reinforced and something that you have already been practicing. It is already a working in the making. And so what you need is sort of magical push, that intention behind it, so sort of give it that power or that elevation to a spell. And you can absolutely do that. A spell doesn't necessarily have to be spoken. It can just be drawn. It is something visual. Magic has a sort of effect. Any effect that it can conjure is something that, gives it power. Something visual can have an effect. Something audio can have an effect. Something tactile itself can have an effect as well. And so all of these sorts of things can be incorporated into your magical practice. Okay, I, for example, am a bardic practitioner, someone that studies the bardic arts. The bardic arts, in regards to my magic, how I do things, is I sort of incorporate things like music, physical expression, poetry, instruments, all these sort of, musical talents, all things you want to, or, and I mean, sure, I also do visual. I have a very broad spectrum. I don't know what they call that or whatever, but I have sort of a hand in every basket when it comes to the artistic expression. And so I would use those sort of things in the craft, because the craft itself is something that is creative. I can do sigils, I can create those sort of things. I can also, do things like songs, written poems, spoken word. All of those things I incorporate into my craft because it is a part of my alignment. And I have found that it is something that is quite potent and powerful when I use it in my magic, when I use it in my working. If you're a person that perhaps is a bit more analytical, someone that does things like research, that in itself is a very important aspect when it comes to the craft. Because your attention to detail, you're sort of doing the math. What you're doing is that you are validating whatever it is you are researching. You're giving it more weight, more density. And so that itself becomes powerful. And so when you are somebody that is, attuned to the more mathematical side when it comes to the craft and creativity, because math can be incredibly creative. You have to think about things like the magic square or the planetary square, working with the planets and the alignments and things of that nature. It's very heavily mathematic, but it is something that you can use in your craft in your daily practice. And not even daily, this isn't something you have to do all the time, just whenever you need it. But it is important to sort of exercise that muscle when it comes to sort of, because the stronger you become in your practice, in your working, the stronger in your magic, and the more power you will then infuse into the working. Okay, and the spirits can see this, they can feel this, they can sense this. And if you're going to work with spirits, you don't necessarily have to. But when it comes to things like magic, it helps a lot, and it is in almost everything if you come from the animistic approach. Me, for example, I cannot say that I am entirely animistic. I can understand the viewpoint indefinitely. I do. But I think my thing is that when it comes to the animistic approach, to say everything has a spirit, just sort of devaluing or sort of, what's it called, watering it down a bit. You're sort of, it's not really gate kept. So everything is a spirit. So that lamp over there is a spirit or whatever. But I think for me, when it comes to something as a spirit is very specific. A spirit has a feeling, a sensation, has a vibration, it has something, it has an effect, sort of has a knowledge about it, has an intelligence about it. It's something that can act of its own accord to a certain degree. And some spirits are greater than others, but I feel as though by calling something inanimate that wasn't really given a spirit, or the spirit hasn't inhabited this sort of thing, sort of diminishes the importance, or I think the level of what a spirit actually is. You sort of say, well, everything is spirit, so whatever, hello, this is different. This is a grimoire, a spellbook. A spellbook can have a spirit of its own if it's imparted, because it shares a connection with the caster. It has a magical connection. You draw sigils into it. It has a spirit, has a life about it. It has characteristics that you implanted into it. So over time, this thing can attain sort of a spirit of its own, because it can have an effect on whoever holds it, on the person that made it. And so, but you are a spirit imparting a piece of yourself into something else. Okay, but again, with that exception, an inanimate object, like a chair, for example, if you always sit in it, if you always use it, it can have sort of a tag of your spirit into it. But does that mean it has a spirit of its own? I can't really say. I guess only time will tell. But I feel as though, like I said many times before, the only time I think a spirit is a spirit is if it has sort of life on its own. It has a semblance of independence. It has an energy about it. I don't know it. It evokes something inside of you, within you. Things like rocks or whatever can have remnants of a spirit. It can have spirit energy, but it doesn't mean that it is a spirit in itself. I think there has to be a difference. Otherwise, you sort of muddy the waters. But again, this is also entirely UPG. But I understand their viewpoint. But it's something that I don't necessarily share, but I can sort of understand. And at some point, I can even take part in because I understand it, But that aside, that was a sort of a strange tangent, But spiritual alignment is something that I believe can help you in your craft if you're not sure what to do. If you don't know what line to go down, if you don't know which one to cross, which one to uncross, think about the things you're good at and then use that in your craft, whatever it is. I mean, if you're someone that, for example, is in the adult entertainment business, it is very physical, but the act itself can be something incredibly spiritual as well, because you're essentially melding one body into another. There's sort of a lot of emotions, things like passions. Then you have things like, the transference of bodily fluids, which can be entirely magical, considering the fact that they are components within certain spells. So let me actually get into that for a second, because I think I did write something about this actually. Let's see. Okay. So aside from focusing on one's intention, it is important to consider if components are required for the spell and if they are specifically geared towards the efficacy of the spell. And the efficacy can also be determined by, if you know what efficacy means, but, whatever you find yourself more efficient and good at, incorporate that into your craft, because it's going to be a lot more effective when you're executing this sort of thing. Magic isn't one-dimensional. It's omnidirectional. It can go in any direction. It can be all-encompassing. It can't really be something that is defined specifically, because magic can change at any given moment. So a component, for example, can be almost anything. From crystals, a lot of people use that plants, which can have spirits of their own because they are living creatures, they are living things, they have reactions. So there's that. To bones, which we can have residual spiritual energy because they belong to something spiritual. And you can connect to something spiritual through the bones. It's sort of like a tag or a bridge. To oils, fecal matter, believe it or not, because it contains an essence. It comes from something living. And it was lying within something dormant that also contained a spirit within it. So it can have energy in itself. And of course, seminal fluid. You know, a lot of things. But, I mean, you know what seminal fluid is. This isn't for kids, but you know what I'm talking about. But that's essentially what it's talking about. My personal usage could be any of those, but I tend to lean more towards, my personal things. I'm not going to really share. But all of the social things like components can also be sort of aligned with your spiritual expression. There are certain, for example, crafts, gods, or deities that embody certain characteristics that not everyone shares. There are certain people that can share many aspects of that same deity. So it would make sense that they sort of align themselves with that deity because they have so many things in common. And it can be easier for the deity to, approach or communicate with you because you are on a similar wavelength. You respond the same to certain things. You have the same characteristics, the same motivations, the same aspirations, and the same things sort of run your life, your morals or anything else. And some deities, of course, can be anomalies in that aspect. But if you're going to work with deities, I suggest trying to reach out to ones that sort of embody what you embody, because the sort of things are going to connect a lot better together than polar opposites. If you're not someone sadistic like the Morrigan, respect to Morrigan. She'll work with whoever if you pay up or whatever. But if you're trying to be stronger in yourself while also embodying the same characteristics, you'd be better off being with a deity that sort of can help you, become exemplary in that can help you excel or expand in your craft, in your level. I've heard of many times where, practitioners, when they're working with a deity, the spirit of a deity, or perhaps a representative of the deity, they sort of tend to just, sort of back out of that person's life because they sort of reached a point where the deity cannot really have any more input. And perhaps the spirit of the person sort of changed in the process. Those sort of things happen, So the alignment that they had before is capable of shifting later on in life. The more you develop as a person, the more your spirit grows, the more your soul sort of, comes into itself, the more things you'll start to discover that sort of align with your core person. When a person is a child, for example, they're just a spirit, a pure expression of one or whatever it is. They absorb a lot of things and they exude a lot of things because they haven't sort of aligned themselves to something that they fit in. But it is a choice they make unconsciously. It's just where their spirit falls. So you can be very expressive when you're younger, but then when you're older, you become a bit more reserved. And so you end up embodying a lot of things that come with that reservation. And so when you're trying to sort of, commune or trying to, sort of use magic in a certain way, if you want to consult with deities, I suggest one that sort of, embodies those sort of, aspects of it. But that's not to say that deities can't work with anyone. It just sort of depends on what you bring to the table, if you're keeping up your end of the agreement, and if they're honestly willing to work with you. A god, goddess, whatever, has a free will to just say, fuck off. We don't care for you. We don't really align ourselves with you either. Why are you talking to us? Why are you contacting us at all? You're better off with this one over here. But like I said, it's a case-by-case basis. But when it comes to starting out, for me, it was easy. I was incorporating these sort of aspects of myself into my craft, things like visual sigils, imparting them, speaking words of life into these sort of things that I'm working, the intention behind it, the working you're doing, charging the energy, grounding yourself. These are things that are very important when it comes to the craft. Now, is it going to work 100% of the time? Of course not. Magic only does improve your odds. But there are certain times where, with intense focus, charging everything else, and with, the right things can align and they end up working out or whatever, it's that sort of thing. But when it comes to alignment, if you're someone creative, singing, for example, woodworking wouldn't really make much sense, But if you're a singer, as an example, like some people are, Try to sing your spells, try to do things like that. Or when you're invoking and communing, sing, use your voice, exercise your muscle, come up with new words, new vowels, things of that nature. All these sorts of things can be inherently magical because you are creating something from nothing. You are making something that does not exist. The act itself is impossible, yet you are doing it. On a physical level, you can't really make anything from nothing. But when you're talking about energy, something spiritual, whatever, it's entirely magical. I mean, a building didn't just emanate out of nowhere. It was something that was derived from our consciousness, from the spiritual realm, from wherever the fuck we get it from. And then we sort of transformed it into something physical. An idea in itself doesn't have a physical form, a physical aspect, but you imagine what it would feel like, what it would taste like, what it would like, how strong it is, how it would stand, like its bearings, the effect it gives, the colors, all these sorts of things. The fact that it exists later from a result of the working, which was magical, is a testament to magic itself, to your skills as a practitioner. A sigil did not manifest by itself. Something created the sigil. You created that sigil. So, in a very abstract sense of the word, you are like a god in that aspect. You're able to create something from nothing. People do it all the time, yet they don't consider it anything magical because they've sort of been convinced that there isn't anything extraordinary about what I just did. Anyone can do it, but that's not exactly true. Not everyone can write a song like how someone else wrote. After the fact, yes, because you can see the building blocks. You can deconstruct it and rebuild it again. But there are many things that we didn't even think about doing, and they exist. That we didn't even think about, how they could taste like, yet we can now. And it's because somebody took from the other realm and implanted it here. If you're, for example, a kitchen witch, you can essentially bake a recipe. You can create something new from flavors that people didn't even think about, and now it exists. And in regards to the alignment, things like kitchen witch, death witch, green witch, a sex witch, or whatever witch you want to call yourself, a folk witch, or even something more ceremonial, like religious or even Christian thing. Even though I think this is a contradiction, and I know I get into all kinds of arguments about it, but these are different expressions that exist because people align with that expression and they sort of found themselves in it, and they grow within that community, within that alignment. And so when talking about spiritual alignment, that is essentially what I am talking about. So this video is mostly geared towards people that are looking to see where they fall in the magical spectrum, because some of us don't even know where to start. Some of us don't know what to use. Some of us don't really have a connection to plants. We don't really give a fuck about crystals either. But whatever you do give a fuck about, use that in your craft. Convert that into it. If it doesn't really exist anywhere, you just created your own sect, your own branch of magical practice, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just make sure it's fully fledged out. Think about it a lot. Use it in your craft. See if it works. See what doesn't work, and then try to sort of pair that with things that make sense to you as a practitioner. And then grow in that. And through the years, through experience, you tend to find out more things. And so later on down the road, when another young person that doesn't know where to turn to, that can't identify with anything else, could perhaps find life and meaning within your branch, within your practice, because it is also their practice, because you are also cut from the same cloth. We don't really know where we all come from, but we all tend to have these sort of things in common. Not every practitioner is a death witch, is a green witch, is a love witch, is a red witch, is a blue witch, is a white witch, or whatever the fuck witch you are. There's still witches. You still practice magic, but differently. But there are certain things that carry on through these sort of different branches of the, practice in itself. So when it comes to spiritual alignment, I hope this sort of helps you find it, helps you find yourself, because that's very important. Magic is entirely individualistic. It is you. It can be made stronger by other individuals adding themselves, adding their power, their mana, their spirit to your own. But it is entirely your practice. You could be a solo practitioner for your entire life, but if it fulfills you, if it gets you what you want, it works. And sometimes there are some magics that can only be done by yourself. It's something that is entirely intimate. Whether you're working with a spirit, with the energetic forces available within the earth, or perhaps with your own self. You're working with your own energies, your own spirits. You, believe it or not, are sort of a microcosm of the world you live in. You know, you have iron in your blood, plasma, you have things like water, you have things like iron, things that connect you to the different elements, things of that nature. You generate your own heat. You know, you're capable of breathing, of wind and everything else, and you can brush dust off. You are connected to the earth already, so you already sort of have these semblances of these energies, these forces within you. So it's sort of understanding how to use those sort of things to your benefit. Okay, so sort of use those things in your craft, in your universe, to grow your spirit, yourself. And if you don't have a purpose, you don't really need one, but this could sort of help you along those lines and sort of help others find their way too. If perhaps they don't align with anything else, you are also another option, believe it or not. Okay, so I hope all of you have sort of enjoyed that. I apologize, I know I came from the grave. It's this whole thing with me. I'm growing as a person. I'm understanding, reading a lot. Side note, I just read oh my god, what's it called? A Grimoire of Cunning Tales by Marshall, the Witch of Southern Light. I highly recommend. And because Marshall wrote a book, a spell book, because it is a spell book and it has really good spells in it that you can incorporate for your working, in a format that I identify with. I also do things like songs, poetry. I also write stories, you know. And I've considered, like Marshall, writing stories into sort of things to sort of encompass spells within them, because they absolutely do. You know, it's because they have an effect, and whatever has an effect is from a working that was done already, and it sort of harbors magic within it. Stories have magic within them. It's just knowing what the magic is and using it and incorporating it into your craft, into your, you know, into you. So I honestly highly recommend the book, and it's not a very long read either. There are many chapters. You know, he has stories, he has poems, and he can even walk you through the creation of elixirs, spells, all that shit. It's very well done, and I'm glad for it, because it was honestly a book that I think was needed, because it wasn't around anymore, and he did something absolutely spectacular. So I applaud him immensely. I love you, darling. So without further more delay, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. If you have a brother locked in a cage, make sure to let him out. Treat others with kindness, especially your animals and your plants as well, because they are our neighbors. They are a part of our world, just like we are. Remember to practice everything in safety, whether it's sex or magic. And let's remember that on this channel, Myths and Magic, or whatever the fuck else is going to be named in the future, we are a collective. We are a consciousness. We are also a family of misfits. You know, and we are here. You know, we can have disagreements, but regardless, we are family in this nature. We are family in magic, in the crafts. And it is what helps us, you know, I guess, find that sort of thing if we were lacking in it before. So it gives us a sense of belonging. I think that's beautiful. So, you know, make sure you brush your teeth. Make sure you wash yourself. And remember to get in your ass. Because if you don't, you might find shit in your underwear. Goodbye!